So we'll just wait another couple of minutes, and then in the meantime. So Teja and Nandini, you were able to attend all the other programs that were organized?
Yes, ma'am. Except the
Yes,
second
ma'am.
class, I was out of station.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, except that one, everyone.
okay. So, good morning, everybody. We'll start. Let others, whoever wants to join, can join. So,
There are no others, ma'am.
it is just three of you.
Yes, correct.
So far, this is all we know of our class.
Okay, I was told there are more students, so that is why. Okay,
Yeah, we
so
hope
good.
so too.
So, not to worry. So, there's nothing to worry on this that you need. So we need to learn and see how we grow with whatever we have chosen and what we are doing. So, quick introduction. I am Geeta Sinha, and prior to this, a little introduction about what I have been doing over once I finished my schooling, and so I've done my masters in graduation in economics, masters in I did my one masters in gender and development from Sussex University. I did get a Ford Foundation fellowship. Prior to that, I had completed my postgraduate diploma in social service, that is XIS's Xavier Institute of Social Service. So it is basically rural management. And then I did work with a lot of NGOs and research organizations where I did get is it audible? I did
Yes,
see
ma'am.
you. Okay.
Yes.
So did a lot of grassroots level work, engaged with women, child issues of child labor, health. When you start your career, it is more working with lot of components in and around in the rural pocket. So the focus was rural, in fact, because I was based in those organizations. I did later have the you can say working in slums. So I did have that later on, but it started with a rural exposure as well. So that is how, and then in between I took a break, got a fellowship, then I went and did my masters in gender and development, then again came back. Then I started working in consulting organization and international organization, aided action. Then I did my mart, and then within that period of another 7 to 8 years, I focused on consulting work, which was management consulting, and it was consulting with World Bank, DFID. So there were other large organizations within which it was around skills development, agribusiness with small farmers. So different components. It is not, when you are in consulting, it's not just one or two projects. Besides this project, you have productivity sheet, and all later on you learn what all that is. So you are engaged with other projects as well. So there were multiple projects of international organizations as well as around World Bank, DFID. So those kind of projects you are engaged. Those are larger projects, and by side you also do a lot of research with GE Healthcare and other organization, World Vision and other organizations. So I was part of that, and I could get exposure of lot of organizations. I did have a small component where I worked for corporates, within CSR or product testing and stuff. They were doing a baby warmer for kids, in Bangladesh and India. So there I was a part of doing that market research, and I did the product testing as well. So that was there. Then in Nepal, I did get chance to work with health workers and how they can enhance their livelihoods. So that was a part of there. And India, so around 18 years of work experience. And then later on, I got a scholarship again, and then started doing my PhD, which is on process. I'm the last leg of my PhD submission and everything. So I'm working on that as well. Besides that, when I was in UK in Oxford Brookes University, I did get the opportunity to teach in London University. That is one of the universities in London, that is Regent's University in London. And I taught there international development, then had the chance also to teach them European history, which relates with international relations. So had those, and then I did get the chance to uh, interact with some of the students, and there was a class on skills development. Basically, when you're doing certain courses, there are certain skills. So it was more again the undergrad students first year, so they were coming how to write academic skills, how to debate, put in those efforts. So those were there. So that is how. And then it's been a year. Last year I joined Jindal Global University, and within this also it's on a online platform the way you are. So it's the same way that that has been happening. So that is my small introduction. But before that, before we start and get into, can you say about yourself, like why you have chosen and why your name, a brief about yourself, and then, because it's a small group, we can go for discussion. I don't want to get into huge or large discussion. It's just to comfort with each other, know each other well, so that later on. Anyone who wants to go first? Teja, yeah, sure, please, you can raise your hand.
Yes. I am Teja Adarsh. I just completed 12th grade. I am from Andhra Pradesh, Vijayawada, which is
Okay.
a very small town. It's a tier two, lower ground of the tier two. So we don't have access to a lot of resources here. And when it's the typical stereotypical world where, sciences rule, no, nothing but sciences exists here. So when I chose a complete, even though I was, in the top grade or the intelligent guy, when I chose this, I received so much hatred. Uh, but then I always knew that social sciences was my route to go, because whenever, especially civics class or political science class, I used to get so excited. I used to read all the lessons when the book came itself. So I always knew social was my route to go. So it was very hard for me. I had to get out of the city. I had to travel an hour to go to a school which taught political science. So
Oh.
yeah, it was a journey every day. I had to go and come back. So and I was after that, in my 11th and 12th grade, I was introduced to Model United Nations by my friend who was in Hyderabad. So that was when I traveled across the country. I went to different IITs, Varanasi, Bombay, Madras, and I participated in different conferences. And that was how I was introduced to policy. One of my
Nice.
chairs at the conference, he was the one who told me you would be a good policy guy. That was how I was introduced to policy. But then I was supposed to go to University of Bristol and London School of Economics. I had to
Mm.
choose between both of them. But then due to financial issues, my father couldn't afford it, and Jindal was the best option available in India. So my journey to Jindal.
Thank you. And I can so much relate with you, because the time when I was into education, I think because I too come from Orissa and from a very small town. And I remember how it was only just engineering and doctor which people used to talk about.
Others are not careers at all.
And I chose different route, and there was when I already got an admission, and in Xavier Institute of Social Service, when my father went, he was working in Larsen and Toubro company over there. So when he went, so there were other guys, they would say, oh, is your daughter willing to go to rural pockets? Is she going to, because you have to associate with people, and there are chances when you travel or anything, there would be like minimum facilities and stuff like that. So they did ask my father, like, and my father came home and said, no, she's not going, we paid fees and everything, she's not going to study this and everything. And then, but later on, I put my mother in the forefront, and then we had that, and then he later
The,
on understood that it's fine.
yes. The only question I ever got after choosing political science is, are you weak in maths? But maths is my second highest score in 10th grade. I got
Okay.
95.
Yeah.
I don't hate maths. I just love political science.
I,
Everybody is very confident. Tej Adarsh doesn't know how to do maths.
and for me it was like, in my house they were expecting I will go into the medical line, because I still love bio so much. I still love biology. I
Most of the political science students love biology.
I just love biology so much. I don't know why. Even in school, maybe you get good teachers, and the way you are taught, it's like still there. You know. So I don't know what, but I just love biology.
If there was
Not
a chance I
and
could
within
take both biology and political science, I would have done.
oh, and for me it is like in biology also not botany later on, but it was zoology more. So
Human anatomy.
so it happens. Yeah. Who goes next? So good. I can relate, with the youngster.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah. You have to unmute. Yeah.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good.
Ma'am, my name is Nandini Singh. I am from Sonipat, and I was really interested in like political work and government work. First, I was a biology student, and then I changed
Welcome.
the stream.
Welcome.
I changed my stream. Somebody introduced me to public policy, and general was the best option. And now I'm here.
Oh, welcome. Welcome to the same group. I think we'll. Yeah. Manasa.
Hi, yeah, my name is Manasa. I did not study biology.
It's fine.
So for me at the 11th and 12th, I was still really exploring like what did I want to get into. So I basically took as wide a variety of subjects as I could. So in my school, they offer like 7 subjects. So I basically looked at the ones which I didn't feel like doing so much and then did everything else. So I ended up with like a really eclectic combination. I did psychology, sociology, maths, physics, English. But of those, what actually stuck with me the most tended to be the stuff that was outside the curriculum. We used to do these like self-study research courses on like things like modern India or partition, and there was a lot of like exposure to um, like rural life. I should give you some background. I went to an alternative school outside Bangalore. It was like in a village. So we would work with the people in that village a lot, and we took a lot of trips to work with like NGOs and like grassroots activists across the country in like Kerala, in Chhattisgarh, in Gujarat. And I really enjoyed those experiences, and that kind of made me want to study it at like a higher level. Um, and when I was looking at like the Jindal course, the way it was broken down and the interdisciplinariness of it really appealed to me. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Welcome. Welcome, all of you. And the best, really, what is good about is you having an exposure, Manasa. What happens is this is where you realize that things are happening in the country, but somewhere it's not reaching to the people. And that is where in policy comes in. And Teja, as you were saying, like it is, you know, you're there, you can comprehend. There are, you have certain skills, you understand things, and then you can bring in Nandini being from Sonipat. So we are in Sonipat, so it's your hometown. So there, even with your education, though you have chosen the route, separate route, and somewhere you are thinking of public policy, what I would suggest is when you look at public policy, it is there. It's impacting each and everyone. It's not that we are not part of it. We don't know what it is. It's not some rocket science that we are going to study. It's just bringing things together, contextualizing it, and then working on it. It's not just studying, but also looking at how it is implemented, how it is monitored, how it is evaluated, and then what impact it is creating, what are the outcomes, and also at some level also to understand how these policies, their history becomes very important when you want to understand why this policy came into picture. Actually, some old ones would be going, some new ones would be introducing, and then you have to wear different lenses to analyze from different perspectives. Why I'm saying this is when we talk about gender, because today's session is just talking about gender and COVID-19 and looking at gender. So here, since you are into this stream and you have chosen public policy, from each one of you, I want to know, do you think the component of gender makes any sense or is important or needs to be addressed in public policy?
Ma'am, I
Yeah.
just have a question before we start. Which century's gender are we discussing? 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st? Because as the centuries evolved, gender currently it's a spectrum. We go back to 16th, 17th centuries, we had male and female. So which
Yeah.
century's gender are we discussing here? Which are we
See,
considering as?
here what we'll be talking will be contemporary, but what we'll be looking at is also historically how it has come in. Today I'm not going to talk about the whole thing today. What I'm trying to put in is how do we understand. For example, you spoke about a huge spectrum. Some would still be thinking why this gender component is spoken about. Some, if I've spoken with you, some would be thinking of, okay, gender and feminism. There are a lot of things that would
Yes,
come and collide with the whole thing.
yes.
So here, what I am going to do, what I am here for is first to understand, and any understanding is not right or wrong. I'm not going into that debate. It is important. What I'm trying to understand, do you think, it's a simple question, do you think gender is an important component in public policy? And if it is, how would you dissect the whole thing? Taking an example. So that is what I want to understand from you. Who wants to go first?
I think it's me again.
Yeah, okay, let's go do that way. You, Nandini, and then Manan. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. I personally believe gender plays a huge component in public policy making because, as a society, according to the official statements, we are divided into two things. We are definitely divided, and one is the advantaged community, one is the disadvantaged community, which has been disadvantaged. And I just want to say, I am a huge feminist, and I also believe gender is a very wide spectrum.
Yeah.
Anywhere we go, any type of community we take, there is always the advantaged one, there is always the disadvantaged one. And if we take gender as the component, obviously there is advantaged one. The male group of people have always been advantaged. There are always opportunities, there are always freedom. There are they can do what they want. They always have the opportunity to do what they want. But on the other side, the female group of people have never been given that opportunity. They've always been persecuted. They've always been harassed. They've always been, I don't know if I should say this, they've been raped. They've been groped. They've always been brought down. And they're even to till date, even after 70 years of caste-based reservation system, we do not have reservation for females. So definitely there is always, whenever there is a community of people, there is the disadvantaged set of group of people, and it's the job of the advantaged section to see that the disadvantaged people get the equal opportunity as the advantaged section. So definitely that exists, and I genuinely believe that the gender and sexuality is a wide spectrum. There are multiple genders, there are multiple sexualities, and every India needs to develop. India needs to improve its education and its knowledge upon the subject, and we need to consider the other newly emerging genders and sexualities as the disadvantaged sections as well, and give them equal opportunities. The basic line is gender and sexuality should not affect opportunities.
So okay, yeah, that's a good highlight of whatever is
Yes.
going around. So you've tried to bring that. Yeah, Nandini.
Yes, ma'am. I think gender plays a huge role in it, ma'am, because our society into divided into classes, and like each component of the society is not treated equally, both men and female. And the from the lower class of the society, both needed, both should be uplifted. I think. So I think yeah, gender plays a huge role.
When you say from the disadvantage or the lower economic group, how do you see gender in the well-off class? When I differentiate in terms of class or the higher economic class, do you find biasness over there, or is there something that plays around, or do you find differences over there as well, class or caste wise, if they belong to the higher?
I think it
Yes,
does play a role.
Okay.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Nandini.
yes,
It
yes,
does.
in the upper class also.
Do you find it in any form? Like, have you identified something? Have you read something which you can relate with?
The ways in which like the oppression manifests, is that what
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
asking?
yeah.
Um, I mean, often if we're looking at it from like a caste perspective, if you're no matter which caste you belong to, you will be sort of lesser than the men of that caste. And if you come from a lower class and you're a woman, it's like a double whammy. And it manifests like when it comes to religion, women are typically seen as sort of lesser in sort of in performing the rituals. There's often a lot of discrimination when they are menstruating. Um, this is, I think, something that is kind of absent in sort of the upper class, upper caste society in urban areas, but it's still quite prevalent, I would say, even within that group. And it's a big, um, it's a big source of like, I think, trauma for a lot of women as well. Yeah.
I believe that the only difference they get, the higher class and the lower class get, is higher class women get to study and they get married off. Lower class women don't get to study and they get married off. That is the only difference that prevails in the Indian society right now. There is, especially the parents do not have a wider, broader knowledge. The lower class people, they cannot afford to let the girls study. Higher class people, they can afford, they let them study, they let them enjoy their youth life a couple of years, then they get married off, have kids, the same old cycle. So I think that's the only difference that plays between the higher and the lower class.
When I started my career and went into the rural pockets and started working, it was mostly the rural pockets of Jharkhand and Bihar. So when I started working over there, what was my observation was, when I looked at, there are certain identities, caste identity and stuff like that, which we cannot negate. But what I'm saying is, I was working with some of the communities in which women used to go and work. It was around work and livelihood. So we were trying to map and see how it is. So there my first experience was that uh, the women from the lower caste, or from the low class, even you can say from the disadvantaged group, they used to go and work in other fields, fields or other contractual jobs. So somewhere it was analyzed, it was looked as, okay, this woman has a freedom to move, but it is for job, you have to earn and bring back home something. And then whether it is in the tribal communities to carry water, or fiber from for firewoods from forest, or you have different communities, different groups, and you will see how differently they operate as well. But overall, when you put up the whole umbrella of that gender thing, you'll find that somewhere that discrimination happens. Things are improving. I won't say we should not be, that nothing is happening, it is so grim and dark and everything. It's not like that anymore. But we are still struggling with, when it comes to equality, that struggle is still on. And the other thing that I experienced was when I went and had meetings with high class communities or high caste communities, the interaction, it was mostly male men coming and talking. I'm talking of the not the urban. I'm talking of the rural. You'll find differentiation in rural urban as well when you work. So when the interaction was basically with men, like who are the head of the family, so they will discuss. Then they will allow, permission, allow, about, I'm using this word. Then they'll allow, okay, you need to, if you want, you can interact with her, yes or no, works out there itself. The woman's decision does not play over there. And even in terms of looking at, from when I tried to look at from the lens of freedom, I looked at that woman from that community did not have the higher, whatever advantage community we are talking of. uh, this is how we look at their advantage. But women, I found that they did not have their own decisions. So somewhere I found they are in a more disadvantaged position over there. They were not allowed to go out, and they had to follow all the norms, when they come out. You know how Bihar, UP, and Jharkhand was at that time. Except those tribal belts where they still have that equal share, which is rare to find in other communities. So it was then. And then when I was trying to break down and look at, okay, freedom for livelihoods, if you have to decide you want to do something with women, you want to work out in that. So I saw it was the other section of the people, that women who participated, she came for decision, she decided whether she wants to be in the group, work something or do something. But on the other hand, when I saw, when we call them the advantaged group, there I found the women's condition was not as expected, in terms of they taking decision, or they being the first ones to interact, or even in terms of going out of the houses, like the mobility was, I think, very restricted mobility that they had. And even if they would travel, it would be someone with them, accompanying them, and then they would be going somewhere. So what I'm saying is, the first important thing is first to identify, is gender, what gender is, and to identify where that problem lies. That is where you can start working as a policy maker. The first thing that becomes important is, within this, you need to identify where the problem is, the root. It wouldn't be somewhere sitting and deciding and then generalizing the whole thing. The rural would show you a different picture, and the urban would show you a different picture. Then, Teja, as you discussed, there are different types of genders coming up, transgender, we are talking about so many other groups. So it is important that we first identify them, we relate that, and we understand, okay, that is a problem, and that is where we can start working on it. So this becomes the first. Then, looking at, as we go down, I don't want to get into, it is a biological, sex is biological, this is social construct. I think you all very well understand that, so I don't want to get into that breakup and everything. Next, what I want to understand from you is, when we talk of gender, what are the key terminologies that come into mind? What are the things that keeps playing around when you hear about? For example, first thing is oppression is there, inequality exists. What are other things that you hear when you discuss about gender? What are the keywords? I can say keywords. What are the
Ma'am, what our society has genuinely put in the minds of boys is that when you hear woman or girl, you hear the word submissive.
Yes.
Definitely.
And
so many people do.
I'll come over here. And if a girl is outgoing, what do you call that girl?
First, in our school, we slut, whore.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Those are definitely the words they use, and especially in the southern rural kind of areas. When you hear woman or girl, you hear the word submissive. You have to listen to what you say. That is the first word we hear. Uh, yes, oppression is there and everything, but I hate submissive, because who gets to be the dominant and who gets to be the submissive is a personal choice. It
And
should
who
not be
decide?
decided.
And who decides? Yeah,
Who decides it? Why, just because you are born somewhere or you do not have an organ, you are branded submissive? Why is that happening? I have no logical explanation for that.
So submissive is one. Okay. What are other things that comes into even
Control.
if it is control? Yeah. Nandini, what comes?
Different types of opportunities, like when women, when we have to choose our, like, even in the, we are at a nice place, like even we are not lower class and all, we have to still consider many things when we are like choosing for our careers or for doing anything. We have to take many things in mind. We have to keep many things in mind, and society pressure is another
Limitations.
factor.
Yeah. and quite restricted in terms of, you have that. Okay, what else?
Chained,
Okay.
chained to the family, chained to the rules of the family, the traditions of the family, or the thought process of that.
And even you will find it is more, if you find this space of women, when it comes, you will find them more associated with caring,
Yes.
the world of care, taking care, then at home, in office, or in hospitals. Why is it that in most of the hospitals it is women who are nurses? Why not men are not nurses? See, these are certain debates. I don't want to put anything for it should be one's own choice. Why we discuss this is important to understand where it is coming from, why this was there, and why this has become. For example, when Teja said about submissive, I remember when in the international space, when I traveled like UK and other countries, when you sit and discuss, um, I did hear a lot of people, on the other side, the Western, telling, when it comes of choice of girls or something, oh, I wouldn't marry a Western girl, or wouldn't want to have a Western girl as a, whatever it's in discussion, but you can make sense of what is being spoken about. And then saying, oh, I would prefer more, South Asian girl or woman because they are more submissive. They wouldn't argue for things. So these are certain things where it should start hitting us and understanding. You start developing it. Gender is nothing, it's not there in the वो क्या बोलते हैं, आसमान में कुछ नहीं है. It's something within us, within our surroundings, and we are part of it on a day-to-day basis. So we it's there with us on an everyday basis.
I think that's because of the mostly because of the upbringing, ma'am. Men are not taught to control their egos. Men are they're like, don't cry, you're a boy. Don't cry like a girl.
Yeah, these
Every
are
every single sentence we hear in our life has a sexist background.
background.
When you are taught to be the tough one, when you are like, you have to be the stronger one, you shouldn't show your emotions, you should be rock solid,
No.
you should like fit into this box, you should do this, you have to always be the stronger person, you have to take the decisions, be a man,
No,
in
and
air
and
quotes, be a
and
man.
and the the dilemma stands there when it comes saying, when men are said, oh, you have to take care of the home, and when you're relating care with women,
Yes.
so you can see where finance, decision making, these things come in. That is where the position of the men is much higher. And overall, within the whole, the important component that you need to know is patriarchy. You would hear a lot of, this is patriarchal, this is something,
Yes.
coming on through generations. So this is one common word, keyword, which you would, one or the other time you would be hearing, like, we live in a patriarchal society, we live in a male dominant society. So these are keywords that you need to also understand and relate with the whole, day to day, whatever, whether you come across such events or anything you come across, so you should be able to relate with that. Okay, so coming
Ma'am,
down with, yeah, yeah,
since you said finances, I have a small story I would like to share here, which
yeah,
is very
please,
related.
please, this is just talking and
So
share.
yeah, the one of my distant relatives, she's very close to me.
Mhm,
Bloodline is very different, but she's an MBA. She came from Indian School of Business. She
mhm,
graduated,
mhm,
and as any regular Indian family would do, her dad fixed up a match. She was married off to a very rich rural family,
mhm.
and the men in the family did not know squat about finances. Nothing.
Okay. Mhm,
But she was an MBA. She graduated top in her college, but she was married off. And the business they were doing, the family business they were managing, the finances were a sham. They were just pushing it off. They were just going by the train. And when she noticed it, she asked. She time and again reminded them, "You need to do it in this particular process. I need to check the accounts. Let me do it." They never gave her the opportunity.
Oh my.
Till one day there was an income tax raid, and almost 80% of their money was taken away. That was when they realized the importance, and then she took over the business. She handled everything, and in almost 3 to 4 years, they bounced back. And even after bouncing back, zero gratitude, they pushed her out of the business again. She's back to being the home person, and they're back to managing the business. Now they are almost as wealthy as they were before the income tax rate. But zero gratitude, they still treat her as the woman of the house. I mean, she gave birth to a child in the middle, but she's now not even like whatever the situation was before, she's in the same situation again. Even after doing so much of hard work, even after literally saving the family from financial crisis, no respect is given. That was one of the story which I moved me, because the father of her father and mother are very educated. Her brother is educated. He's working in a top company, top software company. She's an MBA. She had a lot of job opportunities, but she was married off. And even the people who she married did not care about her education, about her personal feelings, about her talent. They did not give her opportunities, and even when they were in the release, they could not bring down their egos and accept help.
What a classic example of, putting things in place just to understand the whole process of discrimination, the whole part, taking, when it comes about controlling and everything, and when, something hits in, like a crisis, uh, you know women come in, they play the role. For example, now women can do everything. It's not divided that, she cannot do this, she cannot do this. Leave aside the biological stuff, but in social space, in political space, other cultural space, she can do everything and anything you want. And there are studies which says that she can excel in those, right? And the example that you gave is a classical example of the whole curve, to understand gender, how discrimination happens, how decision making happens, how the whole I'll say it was a patriarchal society.
We
And
all genuinely thought that it was going to be a happy ending when they were back to the original financial
yeah,
position, but we did not expect this, ma'am. We always thought that after they saved, she would play a good role in the business, and she would take care of the finances while they took care of the business thing. But it's back again. The father-in-law is operating everything. She has no idea of what's happening in the business again.
and other thing also, from, I don't want to get into the larger theory or anything on this in this discussion. It's going in a very interactive and with examples. Here also one thing becomes very important: the parents of the girl child, or the girl. The rural, you will see, they behave in a very different manner as well. And we think, okay, in urban we have exposure and everything, but at the end of the day, I've seen that parents thinking, we need to put this girl, or has to be sent off to some family in which that family or the husband or whoever is there will be taking care of her. uh, she takes care of the home, she's sent there, but they'll be thinking, okay, financially and other things, this is. One second, I think it's a courier thing. One, please. I'm so sorry. So sorry. Every time I have a courier. So what happens then is, even the parents, the kind of orientation, and we don't know what kind of parents we would also turn out to be. Somewhere thinking, they'll be in safe hands, they'll be. But now it has become important to understand that she can take care of herself. She doesn't need anyone to be taken care of. Sorry.
It's fine.
So I'm so sorry. So
Herself and people around her.
Around her. So
I have
that
seen so many women who, after their husbands died, took care of themselves. For example, ma'am, in my own home, my dad married again. My mom expired when I was in 5th grade. and he married again. And my stepmom, she's an inspiration. Her husband died when her kids were 3 and 4. She worked every day. She put her kids through school. They're in college right now. My elder brother is in college right now. She's an inspiration. She took care of herself. Took care of the family. She took care of the business that her husband left behind. She was the mother and she was the father again. And she had no help from anybody. But then uh, again due to relatives pressure, she had to marry my dad. She could have went on perfectly without marrying my dad as well, but only because of the pressure of her relatives and her mother and all them, she had to marry. But she was the most capable woman I've met in my life.
Great. These are certain. See, you have the other side, one story of your MBA friend, right? And this side, your own mother. So you can look at
Stepmother.
how at whole diverse thing, that is happening. So now you can realize if you have to make a policy, how easy or how difficult it is going to be. I'm just leaving it. I don't want to get into that space. Just coming on, we have seen globally there is a crisis now, which is in the name of COVID. Have you been able to understand what has gone in, how gender has been impacted, how people have been impacted? Do you find that, or have you read something, or have you heard something? What has happened during this phase of 1.5 or 2 years? How it has impacted women, how it has impacted men. It's not, when we talk about, it's more in relationship with each other. So how that has worked out? Anything which you can share?
I remember reading somewhere that domestic violence cases had gone up, especially because of like the confinement and people having to stay at home, like because of the proximity.
Yeah. Yes, that is one. What else?
There are people claiming that because women didn't come out, there were no rapes happening.
Okay.
That is the
Okay.
most idiotic logic I've heard, first of all.
But in news, I can hear rape every day. So
But I don't think there's a major difference between how COVID-19 or the lockdown has affected men and women differently. I mean, maybe in the after effects, because the jobs have gone dangerously low. Obviously, women have even lesser opportunities now.
one is
But
this.
that is, I think
Yes.
that's an after effect, but not. I don't think there's a difference in the lockdown period where gender has impacted very much. I don't think so. I mean, I want to know.
More
What?
with lockdown, it is more with the COVID thing. So when COVID came in, so the first thing which we started hearing was, I'm not going on the scientific, like, men were affected more or women were affected. So there are, differences over there. A study is going on over there as well, and people have come out like, how women have been less impacted, or why men have been more impacted, or why is it vis-a-vis, the other relationship, why that has been happening. So that is one part of it. But social looking at what the first thing that came into was the jobs. And we all know that we are women, equality in jobs, equality in pay, gender pay, that is still debatable. That's happening. But with this crisis, with pandemic happening, when it came to loss of jobs, it was women who lost more jobs as compared to men. So this is one which can be analyzed, work around which it can be looked upon. The second which came is in terms of violence, we can say the domestic violence, and it is not a story which uh, uh, it's shameful. It's not just here, but all across the globe where we talk about Western society, because that is the time when the lockdown had started. I was still in UK. I just came back home this year, so I was there, and there were news, there were studies which kept saying that even in those societies, uh, the domestic violence has increased. And a easygoing example someone would give would, oh, men are frustrated, so that frustration nikalne ke liye they, oh my god, you just, can you buy this? Frustrate, even the woman is frustrated at home. Aren't we frustrated at home?
Everybody is at home.
We all are frustrated. Do you think we'll go and hit and bang in everyone? So whatever is the reason, when you interact and everything, you get to understand, which is pathetic, but something needs to be done. And there are agencies who are working on this as well, looking at how you need to report, how you need to talk, how you need to be aware. And also in many cases, it's not like domestic violence came into play now, but due to COVID, this is one part which is looked at, or the livelihood or the jobs part is being looked at. Even otherwise, my personal experience when I was working the rural, domestic violence used to happen, and what I found was women accepting it, like, oh, ye to hota hai,
That's
like
yeah.
that is one
It's
which
normal.
gives normal. And men thinking, okay, I can, I have rights on
I
her,
own
or
her.
in
I
so
own her.
yeah, true. So you can do that. And the other which I found is also, for example, as a woman, you come out and you say, okay, it's a man or woman, anyone who could be, but in picture it is more of women who are impacted, so we'll talk more about women for sure. So when she goes and complains, the whole governance mechanism, where you find the police, lawyer or something, you will find, अरे ये घर की बात है, आपस में सलटा लो. Sorry, I'm bringing in Hindi in between. Is it fine with everyone? I just like,
I know very little Hindi, ma'am. So
okay, I'm so sorry. Okay,
it's fine.
so
It's fine. I can understand the
and
basic Hindi.
so this is I bring in those because this is what you hear. So just to
Yes.
bring in
Yes.
what exactly
I
they say, it's a matter of family. It should be resolved at their level. Why do you bring it out in
Yeah.
public, or go to police or lawyers or stuff like that? So that is how the whole component, they try to bring in. This is how it is looked at.
Even today, ma'am, there is a lot of discrimination in alimony pay, child support, during divorces as well. When you see the more Western countries, there is an equal split. There is a what do you say? A justified amount which you pay as alimony, which you pay as child support after divorce. But in India, alimony and child support are like, it's like you're taking I don't know, taking money from terrorist organizations. It's better than taking alimony. I do not, but like, in there is a proper format there. Like, you discuss about custody, you divide the properties according to the, if you have a prenup, you divide it accordingly, then you decide on alimony, then you decide on child support. It's done. Here there is no process. Once you ask for a divorce, the woman is the betrayer of the whole family. She has given up on family. She wants to fall on society and do unspeakable things to the world. Basically, she becomes a terrorist. It's better if you join ISIS. There are at least few supporters than asking for a divorce.
So
I'm not. I don't know if this is still the case, but one of the divorce laws that existed before, it was possible for a man to ask for a divorce on the basis that his wife had committed adultery, but not for a woman to ask for a divorce on the basis that her husband had committed
had done
adultery.
well.
Is this still the case? I'm not sure, but I remember
No, it's
reading
not.
about it somewhere. It was one of those colonial hangover things.
I think it was repealed in 2003 or 2004.
Yeah, somebody.
Yeah, by a Supreme Court judgment. Parliament did not do anything. Supreme Court judgment.
We'll come, we know, like, who the Nandini, anything you want to share your experience, anything, because we all have stayed home. It's not that we need to go or read or anything to experience what has changed. One which we came on losing jobs, it's women who have done that. Then looking at domestic violence, again it is the women who have been impacted more. And the third, which you will find, the work-life balance of women has been disturbed a lot. Like, she is doubly burdened in the terms of taking care home. You have kids at home, so you're doing that as well. Like, she's gone into the whole that balance. which existed, whichever format it had, but due to crisis you will see somewhere they have been overburdened as well, whether you look at home or even in society, and you'll find that they have been overburdened. Now coming to policy, for example, if there is COVID-19, there is domestic violence happening, or there are other issues that are happening, what as policy makers our government should be doing?
First of all, accept that women and men are equal. First, most importantly, accept that, and it should reflect in our laws, ma'am. I think so, because I mean, I get it. The Constitution was written 70 years ago, but we are in 2021. So at least the terminology which is written in the Constitution should first change. It should be given equally. Like almost 70% of the Constitution or the Penal Code, everywhere you go, it's written he everywhere. He, him, his. There is no she. There is no her. There is no hers. So that thing, that's the basic thing you have to change first of all. I mean, doesn't directly impact domestic violence, but it sends out a message that women and men are born equal. They are staying equal. They are humans. That is it. All humans are equal. That is one basic message I think, which is very necessary in the 21st century. Directly impacting domestic violence.
I think sort of relating to what you're saying, Teja, is acknowledging that they should be equal, but that's not necessarily the case right now. I think sometimes laws have a tendency to assume equality when in practicality that's not always the case. And so, like, actually making laws, understanding that women are at a disadvantage, and so what can we do specifically for them in order to like help bring them up to the level of sort of being more equal within like the workplace or the household or
Acknowledge them as
whatever.
equal, then help them to bring them up to the equal. Give them
Exactly.
equal opportunities,
Yeah,
of course.
bring.
I agree.
And Nandini, anything you want to say?
I think it's more about the changing the mindset. This women oppression is not a topic of today. It is a trend that has been going on from so many years, and I think we are at much better place than we were 70 years ago. So actions are being taken. That's what I believe.
So here coming on to the point, like what would be the direct, so if for example the crisis has happened and it's happening, we are observing, we are reading and everything, so somewhere some organization, institution, government, something has to be where women can access, where she can go and say, okay, this is what is happening, so you get support or help. So those access points should be made possible, for them. For example, if I'm being harassed, I'm being a victim of I'm not saying you have to play a victim card or those things. I don't want to get into those kind of debate, but here it is important that they have an outlet in the society, or the governance mechanism where you can go and you can talk about it, and it can be you have access to those institutions where you can, for example, if it is police, and I said you what experience I had, they just said it's better, resolve, it's your family matter, it should be resolved at your level, or to some extent even it goes to the level that within panchayats or anything, you just settle that thing over there, they take decisions, and again in the panchayat representatives you will find it is all men. So wherever you look at each step, we somewhere face that, and even even when you see like who is talking, giving decisions, you will see it is dominated again by men. So as policy makers, for example, general, now coming into uh, how would you as a policymaker, I know over a period of time learning, but whatever is happening, you find there is inequality, you'll find there is discrimination, you'll find there is oppression, you find there are difference in roles that a woman plays or a male plays, uh, different rights, women still do not have, property rights, you have to struggle for that, you'll find so many differences in different laws as well. So as policy makers, what is the first thing not just the first thing. What are the steps you would want to take to bring in changes? What is the one thing that you would be doing, or couple of things that you would be doing to frame, particular policy to related to any crisis that is happening, whether you want to address wage inequality, or you want to other inequalities, or discrimination, or COVID, whatever situation it is? What are a couple of things that you would do as a policymaker?
I think reservation for women, especially in leadership roles, would go a long way to help this, ma'am. Because when I think women in a position of power give more opportunities, or give women the chance that if they go and put it out, there is a woman out there who can support them. Because obviously a woman can understand, a woman a position in a position of power can understand harassment, domestic violence far better than a cisgender heterosexual man sitting in a position of power.
And coming to what you said, I would just add, there are, when you read lot of reports, I think in COVID you will find that the countries which have been governed by women
New Zealand.
have been less impacted, in terms. So somewhere it gives, it's not that or everything would be true, but it talks about leadership, right? It does throw light on what kind of leadership it is, and how that got managed. So somewhere you have to keep an eye when you're looking things through a gender lens. It's not necessarily that all the time you will be looking at through gender lens, but these are, when we talk about BSSP, social sciences and public policy, it is interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. So there are so many different components that you will bring together when you talk of a policy, you know. So that is where your role becomes important. You become the change agent, to just holistically analyze, give perspective to certain things. What more can be done? One which you said, okay, you first understand, you realize reservation leadership you're talking, and this is one place when we talk about reservation, when we can debate in some other classes looking at the democracy, sorry, the women's reservation bill. What was happening during that, so it has a historical context, and you can see what is happening now. So that
Women's
that will help.
reservation bill is the only bill in Indian history where different parties came together. All women of all parties in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha came together, but they could not get it passed.
and
That was the only bill.
and no, when you're talking about, I'm just going beyond what we're discussing, also when you bring in that, also looking at how political parties used that reservation bill for elections, when it is political science, from politics. So politics was played on that women reservation bill. Whenever you election, 6 months, women reservation bill, this is happening, that is happening, you won the seat, you are in majority, the women reservation bill takes
We'll do it, yeah.
it's a back seat.
Yes.
We will talk about it sometime. When you will talk, next election, it will come in the forefront.
5 years later.
So these are interesting things, which we need to look into, analyze. Anything you want to add, Mantri, Nandini? You're muted.
Sorry, I think I lost connection for a second. Can you just repeat your question?
I was asking any other thing that you want to add. Otherwise,
One thing that comes to mind for me is childcare, because in a lot of families, it's sort of seen as like the woman's responsibility to take care of the children, even if she has a working job, even if she's doing all the domestic work, it's sort of on her. And so, providing some sort of support in the childcare space could help alleviate some of that sort of responsibility and burden from women, I think.
more than responsibilities, it shouldn't be like it's women's work. It should become, all both of them are responsible for it. So that responsibility needs to be shared.
Also, maternity leave, ma'am, I think that is the debatable issue in India, because other countries give long maternity leaves and paternity leaves. There are daycare centers in offices where you can leave kids and work. India has no opportunities. Even in the biggest of companies, maternity leaves and daycare centers are absent, like zero. And even today, we give condoms for free. We don't give tampons for free. We don't give sanitary pads for free. I I don't understand because uh, sex is a choice. Menstruation is not. I think those things need to change definitely. Sanitary pads need to be given out for free. Of course, condoms are effective, which are important as well. But these are menstruation is not a choice. It happens every month.
Yeah.
And maternity leaves and daycare centers need to be established, especially in the top tier companies, so that women even after they study, even after they marry and give birth, they still have the opportunity to go and work without leaving their kids to, with their grandparents or nannies or different things. You can take your child to the workplace. You can check on them whenever you want. uh, there are many people. I heard this where the woman was asked to resign from the job because she was best breastfeeding her child.
Even there are cases where women are asked to leave the job when they get to know that she is pregnant.
Yes,
So within the whole, and it is not like directly telling them. It's a way, it's a culture, the way it is created, like you end up giving resignation. So it doesn't look like, because you can go and then the whole process would become illegal. So there are ways in which you start creating that environment in which she cannot work anymore. So even that happens. So it's
American laws are an inspiration here, ma'am. A huge inspiration here regarding
All
maternity leave and daycare centers.
daycare centers.
Honestly,
And all,
Scandinavian countries as well have really
yeah,
Yes,
the
yes.
progressive laws in this
yeah.
space. Yeah.
and and even looking at the facilities that are required, and if you want to bring in, introduce like men taking responsibility of it. So paternity leave is not just for enjoying, it is like for, so those things somewhere needs to be instituted, it needs to get into the whole system. And then it's not we cannot say that this is something western we are looking at something. It's not about western hangover or something like that,
India has the
but
highest
something.
population, but
So
we don't have maternity leave.
so that is, there are organizations, like for example, I know some of the reputed or UN organizations who work, so they are trying to bring in that, but that doesn't get, on a day to basis, or the regular people that are working do not get that facilities as a.
Even the formal part, the formal, like the top level IT companies, even the top level industrial companies, even they don't have this. We cannot expect the informal organizations to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, ma'am, our corporate sector, there are no fixed working hours. People are going in the morning and coming late in the night. They have no like family life. Of course, the women have to think twice before taking up the job. So that needs to be improved.
Yeah, so it's basically the concept, people have started talking about work and life balance, how you balance that, what is the time there, what is the time here, what it can be done. So it's a lot of organizations which have started talking about it, and, they're trying to bring in how you create that work and life balance within organizations. There are a couple of consulting firms which I work, which the CEO made mandatory that you, when you're office, you work and you try to complete within that time frame, and don't linger in the office till 8 or 9 or something, in the name of work or something. It is like you finish at 5:30 max, another half an hour or 1 hour, but you all should go home. So there are certain, they bring in, it depends on different organizations, but the major is like as long as you can work. So
And you get paid extra for overtime. So
it depends, not in all cases. So that is where they have introduced productivity sheet and everything. Corporates, you'll find they will try to even know like what that half an hour or 1 hour you have done. If lunch break is just half an hour and the rest, what is the output for that particular day? You have to bring in that productivity sheet as well. Okay. Anything else you want to ask? No? Otherwise, we finish over here. Thank you so much. It was
I
really,
want
really
to,
very interactive session.
ma'am, I
Mhm.
wanted to find out your opinions about the LGBTQ community, personal opinion, all three of you.
My personal opinion, in what sense do you want? Like, is it something like affirmative or something you're looking at how I look at it or something like that?
Yes, yes, like that. Just the basic sense of how you view the LGBTQ community.
The first thing I'll tell you, when this was not even spoken about, I come from that point. It was when I traveled to, not there, when I was working for UNICEF project. One second, let me put this, we can discuss this. So, okay, so 1 hour